Those of you longtime viewers of my channel may recognize that this is my portable Western layout. Western Day is coming up at our church in a couple of weeks. It's Sunday, October 10th, and I've been cleaning the rails and repairing some details. I have to repair some of these stovepipes that got broken from being handled, and all these buildings should have either a potbelly stove with a stovepipe or a chimney. Because back in the 1800s and even late into the 1900s, as late as 1950s, most houses and businesses did not have air conditioning. They had either a fireplace or a potbelly stove for heat, and cooling consisted of opening the doors and windows and sweating it out. The engine that you see running today is my Tyco 460. Some family friends found this when they were cleaning out a house in the attic, where it had sat for several decades. All it took to get it running was some cleaning and lubrication, and I've been using it as a backup on this layout for about 5 years now. You may have also noticed I've added some buffalo over here. The buffalo numbered into the millions in this part of Texas through the mid-1800s. They're probably the most common mammal to be found. And by the 1860s and 70s, they were slowly disappearing, but you can still find a few of them. You can also see I put the snow on the prairie and other prairie flowers and grasses on the layout as well. Now, in addition to the 460 by Tyco, I also have this Bachmann 440. Now, anyone who's ever had one of these will know that they're terrible engines, to put it nicely. They have a motor drive and a tender and drove the engine through a drive shaft. The wheels were extremely tiny, and you can see how close the trucks are to the rails, which made it very hard for it to make contact. Now, when I first got this one, I bought it used on eBay, and it didn't run. But I kept messing with it and tuning it and so on, and I finally got it running fairly well. I was only supposed to use it for one semester of 3 months of children's church. Then that extended to 6 months, or 2 quarters of children's church. Now it's been running for the public twice every year for about 5 years. Once at Western Day at our church, once at National Train Day at the Cleveland Railroad Museum. A while back, I carefully re-gauged the wheels because they were too narrow. And as tiny as these wheels are, they have to be the correct gauge or they won't make good contact. The other thing that I did was it didn't have this washer. And this metal that you see underneath was painted. So all you had was that brass nut making contact with this painted metal. This painted metal, if I turn this around, would transmit power to the lower brush right there. But with this metal being painted and just that brass nut, it made very poor electrical contact. So I scraped off the paint and I added that washer. And those two things have made it a fairly decent running engine for the past few years. But now it's getting to the point where it's not running well again. One thing that kept happening is it runs for a while and then this would pop off. Well, I glued it on there. And then the problem is it may have to come off, because what I also need to do is take this face off right here so I can get access to the commutator. I'm going to try cleaning the commutator with my fiberglass pencil, cleaning the gaps in between the commutators, my brush pick, and cleaning the faces of the brushes. And maybe, just maybe, I can get some more life out of this. However, I know that it's just about worn out. So I'm searching for replacement, and I found this. Tyco started making this 440 steam locomotive in the 1950s. They originally made it for the American Flyer Company for their HO line. American Flyer made their 440 for their own S gauge line, but they had Mantua Tyco make the 440 for their HO line. Later on, Tyco released this as a kit. I can tell this kit is from the 1970s because of this brown. The 1970s era is known as the brown box kit for Tyco because all the boxes were brown. If it came out in the 1960s, the box would be red, and that's what was called the red box period. Now, besides providing a backup to replace the Bachmann for the 460, I also want to try to paint it to look like the first steam locomotive set into Cleburne. This is a photograph of it. And this is a painting. Now that I see them side by side, I can tell that the painting was probably made from the photograph. There are also some details on my model that are not quite right. It doesn't have the right smokestack. This one has a pronounced wagon top boiler, like you see here. And in these pictures, it appears to have a straight barrel. I will be painting it this black color with red wheels and a red pilot with a gold headlight. You can see the gold trim on the cylinders, the gold bands around the steam and sand dome, of course the gold bell. I am not sure there's gold trim on the cab, but I don't think so. And then on the tender, the letters GC and SF. Gulf Coast and Santa Fe was a subsidiary of the Santa Fe that ran in Texas. Back then, the state of Texas required that any railroads running in the state had to have their headquarters in the state. So the Gulf Coast and Santa Fe had its headquarters in Galveston, I believe. But it was fully owned by the Santa Fe. So my two purposes for building this engine is to have something closer looking to the first engine that arrived in Cleburne, and in this area for that matter, as well as having a more reliable backup to the 460. Now this box is missing this part of the top, so I'm hoping that all 82 parts are in here. So I'm going to go ahead and open the box up and let's see. And then this one. So good. It appears that all the parts were actually inside a box in the box, which already makes me feel better. You can see the vintage wrapping paper they wrapped in it. And here are the instructions. The original Tyco model was based on the General. And like I said, we're going to be painting this one to look like a Gulf Coast and Santa Fe engine. Now, the Tyco engine, just like the Bachmann engine, has a motor in the tender with a drive shaft to drive the wheels of the locomotive. However, while this Bachmann one used a fairly cheap pancake motor, the Tyco one uses Tyco's much more reliable Pipman motor, which was featured in every locomotive they had back then, including my 460 up on the layout. And you can see from how well that one's running that these are very bulletproof motors. So I am hoping that this engine will be more reliable than the Bachmann was. So let's open up this box next. Oh yes. And here we have all of our loose parts are in a container. That's good to see. There's our tender truck. Here's our tender shell. The size comparison. Pretty close in size. Here's Bachmann. So here's the boiler. Once again, it's very close in size to the Bachmann. So the next step is going to be painting this, and then of course assembling it. So that will be the subject. Oh, by the way, I just realized you can see the general name here on the boiler. So get ready to say, the next step is going to be painting this, and then of course assembling it. And hopefully we'll have a well-running 440 to back up the 460. The only other alternatives you have to this Tyco is a 460 that was made by River Rossi, which is actually more like British 00 scale or American 00 scale, so it's a bit oversized. Or Bachmann's second generation 440, which they've got much bigger wheels. They have probably a coreless motor inside the boiler rather than a tender drive. I believe it has a DCC socket in the tender. So actually their latest generation 440s are very good. However, they also cost more than I spent so far on my entire layout. So there's our video for now, and thanks for watching. I can figure out how to turn this off.